So now that we've taken a look at SQL, let's turn our attention in particular to Django models, which are a way of representing data inside of the Django application. Because where Django is really going to get powerful in designing our web applications is the ability to represent data in terms of these models. So we're going to go ahead and create a web application that's going to represent what an airline might want to store inside of its own application. So the first thing I'd like to do is create a Django project, and also I'll be going ahead and in my command prompt, this is the file I'd like to create my project in, and we'll go ahead and start by writing Django admin start project and followed by the name of our project. So we'll be calling our project airline, and I'm creating a project for an airline's website, for example. And I'll go ahead and click on enter to run my command. And now if I go to that file, to Django, I can see that now, aside from having that project called project 1, I also have a new project called airline. So let's go ahead and add it to our Visual Studio Code. So here I'll be going ahead and clicking on add folder to my workspace, and so this is my project that I like to add. So here is manage.py, and here is settings.py, and followed by other files. And remember, before actually beginning to edit my code, every Django project needs to have one or more apps within it. So the first app that I'd like to create for this airline is one to keep track of flights. So keeping track of flight information like origins, destinations, and durations, and what passengers are on these flights. So in order to create that application, I first need to enter that project, and so we go to airline, copy that path, and then go to that path, and then now inside of that file I'll be creating my application. So in order to create that new application, Python manage.py start app, and as I said, I'll be calling that app flights. So now I've ran that command. I can see that I have added an application into my project called flights. And so when I create an app, the first thing I need to do is go to settings.py inside of airline and add that newly added app into my installed apps. So now my installed app is called flights, so I'll be adding it. And so now flights is an installed app. Then what I'd like to do is say go ahead and go to urls.py, and which is again the table of contents for all the URLs that I can get for this particular web application. I'm going to include because I want to what I want to do is when someone visits that path of, let's say, flights, so path, when someone visits the path of flights, I would like to include all the flights.urls, adding them to urls.py file that will be inside of my flights application. So first let's go ahead and go to flights.url, and I'm going to be including, so I'll be including all my URLs. So okay, added those quotations, and now, so that's actually us, and let's close that parenthesis. And so now, of course, I need a urls.py file inside of my flights application. So let's go ahead and save that and go to flights, and I'll be creating a new file called urls.py file. So the first thing I need to do is from dot import views, and from Django dot urls import path, and then the URL patterns are going to be a list of paths. So let's go ahead and save that, and now we can begin. But before I begin with dealing with actual URLs, the first thing I would want to do is create the models. Models are a way of creating a Python class that's going to represent data that I want Django to store as a database. So when I create a model, Django is going to figure out the SQL syntax needed to use to A, create the table, but then B, manipulate the table whenever I make changes to those models. So here what I can do is inside of my application that gets created, so here flights is the application that I've created, there is a models.py file, and we haven't actually looked at this file before, but this is going to be the place where we get to define what models are going to be looking like. And so here models are going to be existing, and so now every model is going to be a Python class, and you can think of this of having one model for each of the main tables that we care about storing information about. And you can notice that models is already imported, so we don't have to import it. And now let's define our first class called flights, and it's going to inherit from models.model. So dot model, and then I need to provide inside of this class all of the parameters that this flight has. So what properties does this flight have that I might want to keep track of? Well, a flight has an origin. So again, begin by writing origin, and so origin is going to be a models.char field, and so this is documented on Django's website in terms of the various different fields that exist and that I can include inside of Django model, where here I'm saying here is a character field whose, let's say, maximum length is let's say 72. So I'm going to assume that this origin has a maximum length of 72, and so it's worth mentioning that a char field has to have a maximum length as an attribute or an argument. We have to specify the maximum length of each, and so now every flight will also have a destination, which will be a character field also. So char stands for character, so destination is going to also be a models.char field and of the same maximum length, which is 72. And so now every flight is going to have a duration too, which is going to be only an integer field. So this is my way of telling Django to just add an integer field. So duration equal to models.integer, so field. So integer field because I'm going to be adding an integer to that field. So now this is, as I said, my first Django model. It's a class called flights, where I've defined all of the properties that a flight has. So this is actually flight, not flights, because this class is going to represent a table of flights. So it's one flight object which has many rows, so many flights within the same row. So it's flight, and as I said, this flight class, where I've defined all the parameters that I want, and using Django syntax, I defined all the things that they should have. They have an origin, a destination, and a duration. And so that's our first step into creating models.